the Chronicles of Spectro.
What is the Reviewerverse? The term Reviewerverse was first coined by Matt Burkett, formerly known as Apollo Z Hack. What started off as simple skits within a review transcended into time and space altogether, and contains lore that is much bigger than the entirety of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And it all started on May 25th, 2004, with a review of Castlevania II: Simon's Quest by the Angry Video Game Nerd. On March 2006, the Angry Video Game Nerd debuted with their very first review, and in the following year of June 2007, the Nostalgia Critic premiered with their first ever review. Throughout 2008 and 2009, a war between the two reviewers began to brew, mainly because of the fan bases and the fact that Doug Walker and James Rolfe both acknowledged each other online and decided to commemorate that by having the two characters duke it out. This was a really big deal at the time because this was one of the first examples of YouTube drama. Despite the fact that the two creators were very self-aware of the situation and utilized the drama by basically having their characters just basically hating each other. For example, each of them challenged each other by having them review something completely different, like the AVGN reviewing a bad movie in the form of Ricky 1, and the Nostalgia Critic reviewing a bad video game in the form of Bebe's Kids. The two would eventually find each other and fight in person, with the nerd coming out victorious. But this wasn't enough for the Nostalgia Critic, as his hatred for the nerd continued to grow, and it finally unfolded and concluded in the ThatGuyWithTheGlasses.com 1-year anniversary brawl. This was the biggest crossover for the Reviewerverse. Not only did we see the conclusion of the Nostalgia Critic versus the Angry Video Game Nerd, but we got to see a ton of reviewers on ThatGuyWithTheGlasses.com teaming up and basically duking it out, like Linkara, Lindsay Ellis, Spoony, and many more, including Mati.
From Captain Planet.
Even Super Mega Death Christ was a part of this battle. It was that big. The battle seemingly concluded on a very light note, with Doug Walker's character Ask That Guy, who intervenes the fight and informs the other reviewers that they should all come together because they all share one common thing, and that is reviewing bad media. This concludes the Nostalgia Critic and the Angry Video Game Nerd's beef, and the rest was history. That was one of the first examples of Reviewerverse lore, the war between the nerd and the critic. But despite that era of the Reviewerverse being simple and clean, it only gets crazier from there, as we now transition to the anniversary specials of Channel Awesome. In 2010, Kit Cassio was released and was the second anniversary special for ThatGuyWithTheGlasses.com. This saw the Nostalgia Critic gathering the other reviewers to invade the real micronation of Malassia ran by Kevin Baugh. It's an actual place, Google it. And while they are successful in invading the micronation and transforming it into Kikassia, the Nostalgia Critic's rule over the country is too corrupt, and the other reviewers overthrow him and decide to give that power back to Kevin Baugh. And in 2011, we saw the release of Suburban Nights. This plot centered around the Nostalgia Critic gathering the reviewers once again to go on a quest in search of Malachite's Hand, a magical artifact that once belonged to a wizard by the name of Malachite that was once thought to be long gone. All the while, the real Malachite is also on the search for his gauntlet. This entry in the trilogy is very vital to the Reviewerverse. Not only does this story bleed into future Reviewerverse projects, but it also gives us one of the earliest examples of Reviewerverse lore. The lore in question is the battle between Aeon and Malachite. I'll let James Rolfe explain it to y'all.
Long ago, in the early years before the Common Era, there lived two good friends, an alchemist and a sorcerer. The alchemist was named Aeon, the sorcerer was named Malachite. Both were the absolute masters of their craft. Aeon taught Malachite the ways of science, chemistry, metal, and wheels. In turn, Malachite taught Aeon the ways of magic, spells, sorcery, and the secret rites of the occult. But then the great king summoned Aeon to his throne, where he was his most trusted advisor. The king told Aeon he wanted to devote all his power into creating the strongest force on Earth. So he asked which was more powerful, science or magic. If magic was chosen, Malachite would be put in charge, and though Aeon was a good friend, he knew that Malachite had a dark, brooding heart, and could not risk his power possibly destroying the land. So Aeon responded, "In reason and science is where our future lies." The king agreed and gave Aeon all the control he needed to perfect his craft. Once word reached Malachite of this news, he felt betrayed, and challenged Aeon in a battle to the death. Malachite created a magic stone that would give him unlimited power. He attached this stone to his gauntlet, also known as Malachite's hand. But Aeon, through the science of alchemy, crafted a ring made from lodestone that could reflect Malachite's magic back to him. So the battle begun. The two fought for hours, science versus magic, light versus dark. Mountains crumbled and the world shook. But in the end, it was Aeon who rose triumphant. But because of their friendship, Aeon did not kill him. Instead, he removed the gauntlet and buried it somewhere safe in the depths of the earth. For every time a sorcerer uses magic, he drains his life force, and the gauntlet was the only thing that gave Malachite eternal magic with no repercussions. So Malachite stopped using magic, allowing him to live longer and longer, watching the world of magic fade and the world of science and technology consume the earth. Thus he spent the rest of his days vowing to find the gauntlet again and destroy the pitiful world that science and technology had created.
Our heroes go through various obstacles before eventually finding Malachite's hand and doing battle with Malachite himself. And throughout this adventure, Mati
from Captain Planet
tries to get involved with the Critic's quest, but all the other reviewers decide to not let him in. But when he partakes in the Battle of Malachite, he eventually finds himself overpowering the wizard, as it's revealed that not only is his ring capable of defeating Malachite, but the ring itself once belonged to Aeon, the same ring that defeated Malachite all those years ago. Malachite is soon defeated, but at the cost of Mati's life, in which he is cremated into an oatmeal can and is sent to outer space, which then transitions to the next and final installment to the Channel Awesome trilogy, To Boldly Flee. This is one of the longest projects ever. Holy crap, it is so long. I can't believe I actually watched this 5 different times. Basically, what happened was when Mati was sent to outer space, it tore into the universe, and Mati's soul then manifested itself into this anomaly known as the plot hole. All the while, the nostalgia critic is still mourning over Mati and is under house arrest under the request of Ferdinand von Turl from Battlefield Earth. Yeah, I'm not joking, it gets really ridiculous. Even General Zod is here as a secondary villain. TLDR, the nostalgia critic gathers his reviewer buddies once again to go on another adventure, this time in outer space. With the plot hole unleashing itself onto the universe, our heroes try to stop it from growing any further. This causes the nostalgia critic to try to seek out what's beyond the plot hole, so he decides to merge himself with the plot hole, going inside and finding himself in our reality, finding Doug Walker himself. You see, apparently Doug Walker was writing the script for To Boldly Flee and accidentally manifested the nostalgia critic to come to his reality. The critic has 2 choices, whether to stay in the real world and live a normal life, or go back to the Reviewerverse and sacrifice his own. He decides to save the Reviewerverse, punching it and basically sacrificing himself in order to save the others. Now, in regards to the plot hole's involvement with the Reviewerverse, I sort of see it as a reboot or at least a reinvention to the Reviewerverse. Because after the NC versus AVGN and the anniversary specials, there was now a completely different mindset in regards to how the Reviewerverse was moving forward. And the lasting effects are still felt to this very day. The nostalgia critic came back from the dead, the Atop the Fourth Wall movie, more Reviewerverse lore, and a very, very dangerous threat that the plot hole unintentionally awakened. We'll talk about that later. For now, let's talk about the events that happened during the AVGN vs. NC and the anniversary specials, because there's a lot to cover before we talk about post-plot hole events. Let's talk about the obvious. Linkara, host of Atop the Fourth Wall Where Bad Comics Burn. Now, a lot of people say that the Nostalgia Critic is very skit and lore heavy, but in regards to the Atop the Fourth Wall show, it is very lore heavy. To which, at the time of this video's recording, his most recent storyline, The Contest of Champions, officially concluded all the way back in December of 2023. There is an entire video dedicated to breaking down every single lore in the Atop the Fourth Wall, which was created by The Log, which I highly recommend you guys checking out in the link in the description below. And the only reason why I'm saying this is because Linkara's lore is super long. And I feel like it'd be super redundant to just regurgitate the same things that The Log said about Linkara's lore. So I'll just talk briefly about some of the important things that go on within the Atop the Fourth Wall show that are very vital to the Reviewerverse. One of the most important characters within Atop the Fourth Wall is Mechakara, who's basically an evil version of Linkara, except that he's not. You see, he's actually an evil version of Linkara's side character, Poyo. Yes, Poyo the blue robot. You see, in an alternate universe, machines took over the world, and Poyo took over the body of Linkara, thus transforming himself into Mechakara. His first appearance was in Linkara's review of Superman vs. Terminator issue 1. He eventually revealed himself to Linkara within his review of Ultimates 3 issue 5, eventually leading up to his defeat, in which he would eventually come back to fight Linkara time and time again. Now, one thing that a lot of people didn't know about, including myself, is the fact that Mechakara actually appears in Suburban Nights via a special post-credits scene, which is only exclusive to the DVD release of Suburban Nights. In said scene, he retrieves what's left of Malachite's hand, making a sinister laugh and implying that he will eventually return, in which he does within the events of To Boldly Flee, in which he works with Turl and General Zod to defeat the rest of the critics by simulating them and turning them into robots. He could also be seen briefly holding Malachite's hand while trapping Linkara in his closet. Eventually, Mechakara perishes alongside Terrell, General Zod, and the Executor as they both explode in their Death Star. But this won't be the last time we'll see Mechakara, as we'll talk about him much later in this video. Now, in the case of Noah Antweiler, aka the Spoony one, he's got quite of a complicated history, so to say. Let me explain. You see, there's a character within his review show, The Spoony Experiment, known as Dr. Insano. Dr. Insano is kind of unique in a way because he's not only a villain to Spoony, but he's also a villain for Linkara and many others. He was sort of like the Thanos of the Reviewerverse, which says a lot, I know. Being this impending evil force, he is by far the most complicated villain ever. Not because he's complex or anything, but it's because of the character's history that makes it all the more confusing. The Reviewerverse doesn't know whether or not he's a split personality of Spoony, or if they are completely two different characters.
Oh no, you got the goggles and the...
No! I mean, okay, I was before, but that was the past.
Okay,
Within the events of Kickassia, it's explained that Spoony suffers from some slight split personality disorder, which eventually is revealed to be the fact that he sometimes transforms into Dr. Insano, which then leads to one big question. If that's the case, then who is this Dr. Insano? What happened to the Spoony that died by the hands of Dr. Insano? Are they even the same character? And the answer is, and I shit you not, the writers just fucked up. I am not joking. You see, the Walker brothers kind of have a tendency of writing in these reviewers as if they're all the Nostalgia Critic, because I think it's kind of evident the fact that Doug Walker himself doesn't watch the other reviewers, let alone their shows. So it's kind of in character and sort of out of character for them to feel like they obviously don't belong in these anniversary specials, which is completely different from how some of them are presented within the Atop the Fourth Wall movie. For example, Angry Joe is just there for the ride within the anniversary trilogy and kind of does nothing aside from making one-liners and just being batshit insane. But within the Atop the Fourth Wall movie, he can shoot electricity out of his fingertips. You know why? Because he does that in his own review show. And I'm surprised that the Nostalgia Critic didn't even implement that within the anniversary specials. So what gives? But yeah, coming back to the Dr. Insano fiasco, it's all just due to the fact that they just simply fucked up. And because of that, you can simply justify it all because of the fact that you can blame it on the plot hole. Did you guys know that there was a Cinema Snob movie? What? Yeah, I sure didn't know about that until doing research for this video. Released in 2012 and directed by Brad Jones, aka the Cinema Snob, and tells the origins of the Snob, who we find out his real name is actually Craig Golighty. Yeah, Craig Golighty. We'll talk about that name later. The plot centers around Craig trying to make his first feature film, a blaxploitation film by the name of Black Angus. It doesn't go well. Trying to find a way to sneak himself into the world of film, he ends up joining a film society of critics and going under the name the Cinema Snob. But what the Snob doesn't know is that there's a murderer on the loose killing all of these film critics, and it just so happens that he is being blamed for these murders. Long story short, it's revealed that it turns out to be a local cop that is killing all these critics, all because of the fact that his father was once a filmmaker who had critics tear his film apart. He ends up killing the murderer, and that's where the story ends. This is probably one of the most grounded Reviewerverse stories ever, because while you have space adventures, evil duplicates of yourselves, and super mega death Christ, here you have a story about a pretentious filmmaker wanting to make it big within the industry, only to interlock within a murder mystery. And coincidence or not, the Cinema Snob's character arc actually bleeds within the anniversary specials, specifically within To Boldly Flee, in which the executor lures the Cinema Snob and tries to convince him to join his ranks by becoming a filmmaker, finally fulfilling his dreams and giving him exactly what he wanted. And of course, the Cinema Snob rejects and rejoins the other heroes. I just find it crazy how the Cinema Snob started off like this and ended off like this. Now remember when I said that his real name is Craig Golighty? Because of that name alone, I thought that the Cinema Snob film wasn't canon, all because of the fact that in To Boldly Flee, the executor calls the Cinema Snob Bradican, implying that the Cinema Snob's real name is in fact Brad Jones, just like his real-life counterpart. But in the Cinema Snob's review of I Spit on Your Grave, it's actually revealed that his real name is in fact Craig, as a character from that film appears in said review calling him that name. So yeah, this is one of the few times where a reviewer doesn't use their real name as their in-universe alias. And then there's Lindsay Ellis, formerly known as the Nostalgia Chick. Her inclusion within the Reviewerverse is quite interesting because on her show, there was a story arc known as the Dark Nella saga, in which one of her cohorts, Nella, ends up dying via a ladder falling on top of her. Don't ask, just accept. She's eventually resurrected and transforms into Dark Nella, in which she confronts Lindsay, and a ton of chaos and mischief ensues. To make a long story short, Dark Nella is eventually defeated and Nella comes back to her original form, and everything gets back to normal again. The Dark Nella saga is quite interesting because while it's not the most talked about Reviewerverse piece of lore, the story does get referenced in other projects like Atop the Fourth Wall. In his review of A Nightmare on Elm Street Paranoid, Lenkara's house was currently being haunted, and he contacts Nella for advice due to her past experience as Dark Nella, due to the fact that Dark Nella herself is a supernatural entity. What's quite interesting about Nella herself is the fact that while she was a co-star on the Nostalgia Chick show, her character kinda went solo. And she played a pretty big role in a crossover that I'll talk about later on.
Oh, come on, seriously? Dude, can you call me later? I'm making a video right now.
Hey, you should look out your window.
Look out my window?
Now, before we end this video, I just want to say thank you guys so much for watching this video. It wouldn't have been possible without you, without the fans of the Reviewerverse. I also want to give a big shout out to Big Jack Films himself for overseeing and helping me out with this project. This video wouldn't have been made possible if not for Jack's help. So Jack, if you're watching this, thank you so much. You're an awesome human being. Please go subscribe to Big Jack Films in the link in the description down below. He posts various reviews and is an integral part to the Reviewerverse. So please, if you are a fan of the Reviewerverse and haven't heard of Big Jack Films, please check him out. What are you doing? And I also want to give a big shout out to my friend Taz, who made a small cameo in this video. Also check out his channel in the link below. Part 2 of my retrospective of the Reviewerverse is still being made as we speak, so it might take some time and it might even be an hour long depending on how much I cover. But yeah, thank you guys for watching, like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.